I think we're recording, so I will use the mic. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Hugh Suck. I'm a family physician in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health. And I am lucky enough, I think, to have the last story in this book. So it was an amazing thing to be a part of, which we'll get to a little bit later. So we have this annual series of authors. I remember Tracy Kidder coming here and Mark Vonnegut and what have you. And those famous authors have nothing on tonight's authors. I want to make sure that's clear. In fact, this is the first time we've had more than one author. So you all are going to get your money's worth. We have 9 authors, 9 writers, all of whom participated in this wonderful book, Storytelling Our Way, or in the series, Storytelling Our Way to Health Equity, and in this book, See Me Through My Grandma's Eyes. And I've had a chance to read it with some students here. I want you all to know we did a session on this, and people were like in tears reading these stories and then talking about them. So it's had a dramatic impact on our students. So this is all part of the Worcester Clemente course in the humanities. And that course offers free college level courses for highly motivated adults who aspire to make a difference in the world. And the course is taught by our own Lucia Knowles, a professor of English at Assumption University, whose work is focused on writing literature and medicine and storytelling for personal and social change, which we need more and more of. So what follows tonight is really a collage of excerpts. So you're going to, get to hear the voice of the writers, but that's not enough. You're going to want to get the book. So the books are there, and I am waiting to get mine signed by the authors, so I'm excited for that. So we're going to hear from Latoya Lewis and Duroa Owens and Doreen Samuels and Valerie Santine Thomas, who couldn't make it tonight, but the story is in here, Anna Herrera, Teresa Buccico, Laura DiCaronimo, George Odomako, and AJ. Hopefully I got the pronunciation right. Following the reading, Professor Knowles will moderate a discussion that includes the Clemente authors and members of the Worcester medical community who also contributed their stories to the project. I see Dr. Joel Popkin and Zenny Popkin. I am here as well. And all other contributors, Maddie Castile, Peter Lindblund, and Molly Zoe. At the conclusion of the event, as I mentioned, we encourage you to buy a copy of the book and have it autographed. And it is only $10, but if you would like to contribute a little more, that will help to honor the storytellers and replace funding that was recently canceled, as you're reading about in the newspaper, by the National Endowment for the Humanities. So this is our chance to give back. So let's let the storytelling begin. I think, Lucia, are you going to? No, we're just going to go right to our first. Yeah. All right. Let's do it. Thanks, Latoya. That's great.
Hello and good evening to all of you guys. I just want to say it is a pleasure to be here to speak in front of each and every one of you guys. And I just hope that as you are here and you are listening to our stories, that don't stick to the pain of the story, but more of the resilience and everything it is to be here in front of you to show you the prodigy of what we became out of our stories. So as he said, my name is Latoya, and I'll be sharing an excerpt out of my story. I've always thought of myself as never having a home, only houses where I've lived. The houses I've lived in for the first 12 years of my life was called the House of Loss. It was a place where my mother died before my 3rd birthday. It was a place where I learned of my dad committing suicide after he killed his girlfriend, who was pregnant with my sibling. It was a place where my beloved brother was taken away from me. As a child trying to survive in an apartment where 9 people had nothing but constant shouting matches, I learned that I needed to care for myself. If I cried, someone would give me something to cry for. At the age of 15, I moved with the other members of the Raft of God House, is what I called it, in a neighborhood where girls walked the street half naked, boots up to their thighs. There, I found myself surrounded by streetwalkers, pimps, drug transactions, raids, shootings, and other things straight out of a New Jack City movie. You couldn't even come in and out of my building without interrupting a drug deal. And once you came inside, you were greeted and welcomed by the welcome home roaches. When you are exposed to that kind of environment as a child, It can shape the kind of adult that you will eventually become. The thing that really made me grow up fast was realizing I needed to take responsibility for another life. When I became pregnant at the age of 16 and refused to get an abortion, my sister kicked me out. After spending the first 6 months of my pregnancy homeless, another sister finally took me into her home, but not into her heart. When I would open up the refrigerator or cabinets, I would see how the food was always labeled with her children's name on it. I wasn't allowed to eat any of the labeled food, which pretty much was everything. When I would come home from school in the afternoon with my daughter, we would have to sit on the porch some days and wait until my sister came home from work to let us even into the apartment. The winter times were the worst times for me. I would be sitting on the porch, a newborn baby, blizzard conditions, and say, my child is going to be sick. Next thing you know, I would have neighbors that would come out and tell me, you cannot be out here. This weather is not good for that baby. Sometimes neighbors would even invite me into their home, would buy me formula because I couldn't have access to it since the doors were locked. I was always questioning, always asking why. Why did my life have to be this challenging? What did I ever do to deserve this shitty life? I must not be worthy of love or capable of success. The thing I had always feared seemed inevitable. The story of my life would be just the same as the story of every family member who had came before me. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Daroa Owens, and my story is titled The Sun Rose and Mama Roared. I was born into the system, prematurely and drug addicted. My mother was caught up in the life at the time of my birth. I spent the first months of my life in the neonatal intensive care unit, gaining enough strength to go home with my grandma. My siblings and I were bounced around from foster home to foster home, group home to group home. During this time of moving from foster home to foster home, I dealt with sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual trauma. I had already experienced that with the men who would frequently show up to check on us when we lived at home. Now it was continuing with other people who were getting paid to care for me. Eventually, I got placed in a home with my sister, and the same cycle began: grooming, touching, etc. When I noticed the same thing was being done to my little sister, I made complaints to my social worker and to the supervisor, and even recorded a statement to the district attorney. Nothing ever happened to that family, but even though I know no one believed me at that time, I was successful in getting my sister moved from that home. I quickly got a reputation for being difficult, so my stays were short and my moves were frequent. It got to the point where I just stopped unpacking. My younger siblings went on to be adopted. I got sent to a group home for acting out. And when they decided that I needed a higher level of care for my CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, dissociative, and paranoia disorders, they sent me to an intensive residential treatment program center, an IRTP, at Taunton State Hospital. This was to be my home until age 18, when I aged out of the system. When I grew up, I was scared to be a mom, but my two beautiful daughters turned out to be my world. Life with my daughters at home was beautiful, but during the pandemic, I was dealing with a lot. I was going through a med change, and I was pulled out of work for mental health reasons. Because of the pandemic, I was trying to virtually homeschool my two children in two different grades at the same time, even though I have a learning disability. I also had to handle food, laundry, and hygiene, all this while being evicted. I had to do on my own with two girls looking up at me like, we believe in you, mama. You always get it done. But inside, feelings of guilt, failure, and worthlessness were building. It was more than overwhelming. Around this same time, I noticed my oldest daughter's breasts growing seemingly overnight. As a survivor of sexual abuse myself, this triggered immediate red flags. I was thinking about my sister what my sister and I had experienced as young girls, and I went into protective mode. When I took my daughters down to the police station asking for them to be checked for signs of assault, the police asked me if I had proof. I said no, just a feeling. I was given a voucher for a cab home, and the girls and I were sent home. Feeling dismissed and treated as a crazy person only fueled me being in crisis. I called the ambulance this time and asked to be picked up so my daughters could be rape kitted. The EMTs arrived and we went to UMass Memorial. In the hospital room, I had one daughter on each side as we lay on the bed watching TV. I kissed them both. A nurse popped in and said the doctor was ready to speak to me and that she would wait with them. Down a few doors, I was met by a male doctor. I knew that everyone I came in contact with at the hospital was a mandated reporter, required to turn in suspected cases of abuse or neglect. So I had a full-blown panic attack as I attempted to explain what brought us there without looking like an abusive or neglectful parent. Seeing my panic symptoms, the doctor said, "What do you usually do when this happens?" I said, "I need fresh air and a Newport." He said I could step outside, and I did. After about 10 minutes, I was able to get myself together and re-enter the hospital, only to be stopped as I tried to go into the ward. I said I was already here, my kids are back there. The social worker walked up to me and said my daughters were being removed from my custody and placed into the custody of Department of Children and Families. I let out a shriek and fell to my knees. The security guard lifted me into the restraint chair and placed a spit mask upon my face. I was wheeled up to the psych unit where I was kept for 3 days. Upon release, I was given a cab voucher. Oh, I'm sorry. I was given a cab voucher home and some prescriptions to fill and a court date for the next morning. 11 complaints of child abuse and or neglect had been filed against me. 2 of those charges charged me with abandoning my children by stepping outside the hospital doors when the doctor suggested that I do that. If the people at the hospital had called the crisis response team instead of security and DCF, things would have gone very differently. I needed to be supported instead of stigmatized. I was hyperventilating and experiencing a panic attack as a result of the severe anxiety disorder that I live with. Why wasn't I helped as a patient instead of treated as a criminal? All I was doing was what I thought was necessary to protect my daughters that I love dearly. I suddenly understood the overwhelming difficulties that lie in wait for mothers trying to raise their children with too little support and too little money, parenting in poverty while battling mental health problems. I shivered as I wondered, is this the DCF DSS curse that had afflicted marginalized families like mine for generations? My mother, my grandmother, my mother, and I had all been taken away by the state just after our 9th birthdays, and our mother's mental health problems. But each one of us had ended up having mental health problems ourselves and losing our own children at the age of 9. I am here to end that cycle. I have been a mom since the age of 21, living my life for my children, but the system took away my job, my responsibility, my title, my children, and my will to live. For the last 2+ years, I have felt worthless and suicidal every day, and every night I go to bed hoping that I do not wake up. But here is where I am today in my healing journey. DCF says I am unable to adequately parent, so I am redirecting my energy and laying a foundation for what will one day become my legacy. No matter what happens, I want everyone to know how much I love my daughters. I am severely traumatized from the childhood I experienced, and my greatest fear in parenting was that I did not want my daughters to go through what I had gone through. I would like everyone to remember that the times when I seemed difficult or unstable, I was trying to protect my children. I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. That's why I called the crisis line. That's why I went to the police station. And that's why I called for an ambulance. The results have been having my daughters removed and public humiliation. At any step in this process, someone could have listened to a mother's tears, a mother's fears from someone that should have known that there is a lot to worry about when trying to raise your daughters in this world. This story is dedicated with love to my baby girls, always and forever your mama. A mother's love cannot be stigmatized, for it knows no bounds and is everlasting. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is a story about my son, Andrew, who's on autism. I cannot emotional, you know. Yes. Sometime I worry and I pray to God, ask him to tell me the year I will die. Yes. Yes, I know people don't know when they are going to go, but I ask God to see me on my knee and give me everything over 90 because my son still needs me. When you have a special need child, the responsibility of being a parent don't go away when the child grows up. As we say in Jamaica, small child, small problem. Big child, big problem. I give the name of AG, that's his name, Andrew, but that's AG. All AG has ever wanted to be is to be treated like a regular human being. He wants the privilege that other adults have, and he wants basic respect. Right now, AG is living with one of my daughter, but there's not enough money to pay for his upkeep, even though he contributes to the rent. In fact, my son would really like to be out in place of his own, where he could make friends and invite them over. What a grown man would not feel that way. I can even see it. But yeah, thank you. But if there's really any hope that he will ever be fully independent, whenever something confuses him, like when his transportation does not turn up when he expected, he called me to tell him what to do. And I feel guilty if the phone ever rings and I don't answer. Once I was on my way home from a trip when I got a phone call from the police saying that my son had gotten into a fight with my daughter and threatened to push her down the stairs. Fortunately, this time the police understand how to deal with persons with special need and asked me if there was a friend he could stay with for the night. For this one time, I was able to keep him safe, but the chronic anxiety that comes from caring for a son with a chronic illness has worn down my body and my mind. I love my son very much, but I'm going to be 72. That was last year. And my body is weary. I wish I have a chance to live my own life and go where I want to go. I have done everything I can to get AG into program that can help him. And I've joined a lot of boards that are supposed to help people with autism. But a lot of the time, the board just want to talk about kids, not adults. They don't realize that those kids are getting older all the time and their parents are getting older. I wonder what will happen to him if something happened to me. Even though caring for my son is such a source of stress, caring for people brings me a deep sense of joy. When working with people in recovery, I know that each one is somebody's brother, somebody's mother, somebody's friend. And working with students with developmental delay as part of my job is also deeply satisfying. The two students I work with individually can't even talk, but I feel deep empathy for them because I know what they are dealing with. Like my son, they deserve respect. They are human beings too. If we could all look at people who need us as somebody's son, then maybe we could go one step further and see them as everybody's son. And if that ever happened, I could finally stop worrying about living past 90 because my sons need me.
Hello, everyone. This is my very, very first time. You can ask Frank standing this podium right now. Oh my God. Very much.
You got
Okay, I am Ana Herrera, and the title is I Was Lost in of Labyrinth of Symptoms. And I standing here honoring my sister who recently passed away. Yeah, thank you. About 8 months ago, after a bunch of root canals, after numerous doses of Tylenol, ibuprofen, allergy medication, throat spray, 11 courses antibiotic, numerous x-rays, scans, visiting all kinds of specialists, countless call doctor's office, and more hits to my credit card, my budget could survive. Thanks to my new doctor, I was pain-free. Finally, I will not have to struggle to go work, support my family, or I will not have to struggle when I came home to care for my children. But it will take much longer to deal with psychology pain of having to deal with medical professionals who will not listen to what I have to say, respond in timely way to my suffering, and treat me with respect. I am still haunted by their dismissive words. Oh, honey, you are well healed. You must something else going on with you. That was the doctor. Oh my God, I was thinking, what else is going on with me? I was thinking the worst. I have 3 children. I don't want to die. There is no reason to worry, Cole. Every time you call here, you have new symptoms, Cole. I am sharing this story to remind all dental professionals that our lives are in their hands. By refusing to tell us the truth, delaying treatment, they put our life in risk. And all the medical professionals who refuse to admit that mistake has been made by the endodontists or surgeons who failed me. But also, I write to pay tribute to my 3 heroes, which the chief of the ENT department who called me personally a few hours after my x-rays to confirm the infection of my tooth, and who listened me when I say what I experienced a problem. The oral surgeon, who his staff who noticed my pain and did something about. I will always remember the moment that my oral surgeon say, trust me, I'm not leaving you alone, Cole. I finally felt hurt. I finally felt hope. Thank God for the work, the good doctors like this who care about and listen their patients, and they are the true heroes. Thank you, everybody.
All right. My name is Teresa, and I'm going to fix this mic a little. Not that tall, but all right. My name is Teresa, and the title of my story is See Me Through My Grandma's Eyes. For the first 10 years of my existence, I had the life of a child. But when I was 11, I found out that the woman I called Ma was really my grandma, and my biological mom was her only birth child. Learning this secret caused me to question everything but Ma's love for me. But when I was 15, my belief that Ma would always be there for me shattered like the windshield I flew into when another car hit us and we drove home from the laundromat. As I watched the jaws of life work to free Ma from the wreckage, I felt alone and overwhelmed. Suddenly, instead of Ma being responsible for me, I would need to advocate for myself and for her. Sent to the hospital in a separate ambulance from Ma, my mind would grapple with reality. No one would be coming to help me. My biological mother was in a treatment facility for her lifelong substance use disorder. My father, who I had met for the first time only the year before, had no contact with me. My brother was incarcerated. Once at the hospital, all I could think about was when I would be able to be reunited with Ma. But when my requests to see her, maybe for the last time, were ignored, instead, the doctor taking the glass out of my forehead asked me, "Does this hurt?" "No," I exploded. It fucking tickles. The doctor immediately stopped treating me and said he was taking me to tell my mother how I had spoken to him. He seemed to be more worried about his dignity than my physical or emotional pain. However, I was relieved to finally have a chance to see my mom. And when the doctor complained about my behavior, I knew she saw the scared little girl in front of her. Instead of a foul-mouthed brat, she saw her ninth grade A student projects fair winner. She grabbed my hand in hers and in her soft voice looked me in the eyes and said, "Mija, behave." I remember thinking, haha, doc, she loves me no matter what. In retrospect, I can see from that point forward, all my decisions I made were shaped by my determination to never disappoint Ma. Her love gave me the courage and strength to move forward. I don't recall the doctor's reaction to this episode. I do know that he never completed my treatment. Years later, I still had glass coming out of my forehead. 20 years after the accident, I learned that I still had damage to my neck and a curve in my spine that might have been detected when it happened, but I was never given an x-ray. Instead, I was sent home soon after the doctor complained about me to Ma. I was asked if anything else hurt besides my forehead. Of course, I said no. Looking back, I wonder why that doctor was so offended by my sarcasm that he couldn't see the frightened little girl in front of him. He needed to see me through my grandma's eyes to really see me. This was the turning point of my life. Life as I'd known it was gone. 6 months after the accident, as I entered the 11th grade, Ma was finally ready to come home. Each day before I headed off to school, I made sure she had taken her medications and had breakfast. After school, I'd make her lunch before heading out to work. This is when I became responsible for Ma and for myself, both of our lives, our physical and emotional health, our well-being and growth. Were completely dependent on my ability to adapt, learn, and apply what I had learned. I wondered what our future would look like. Today, I am proud to see how far I've come despite the odds. I use my experience as a survivor of multiple tragedies to advocate professionally for marginalized people labeled difficult. As a Massachusetts certified peer specialist, I focus particularly on supporting those with co-occurring disorders of mental health condition and substance misuse. Over the years, I've learned to use communication as an art form to create a portrait of people's needs so they get the attention, empathy, and help they need and deserve. I know from my own family stories how important that is. Today, I am calling on all medical providers to humanize healthcare. When people seem silent, ask yourself if you're really listening. When people seem difficult, ask yourself if they have difficult lives. My story was hard, not me. I'm pleading for medical professionals to approach patients and family members with curiosity, compassion, nurturing, and holistic healing. Let my voice remind you that someday a story will be told about what you did or failed to do in the course of your career. Make sure that when that time comes, people tell a story about a person whose skill was matched by their empathy as they cared for humanity.
Believe it or not, I'm not George Otomako. And you don't know what you're missing because George has a wonderful, deep voice and a rich Jamaican accent that could just warm this room up. But he is in New York and unable to leave. So I'm George for today. In the early years of my adulthood back in Jamaica, I studied social work and served with the Disabilities Association and the Social Development Commission. As a research assistant at the Center for Disability Studies at the University of West Indies in Kingston, George still suffers from the effects of childhood polio. I conducted interviews, ran focus groups, and presented a series of lectures on interacting with people with disabilities to over 100 recruits and graduates of the Jamaican Constabulary Force and over 100 public healthcare professionals. And during my early years in America, I served as a member of the Human Rights and Disabilities Commission in Worcester and was a featured speaker for community groups on the experiences of LGBTQ and asylum speakers. George came to America because his life was threatened as a gay man in Jamaica. I also earned college credits through Clemente and published several essays in their books. Now I was homeless in New York. I felt at risk at the shelter where they put me. Many of the guys were substance users, and I'm not talking about marijuana. Some of them had mental issues and were combative and exploded into violence. One night at the shelter, I was having heartburn and nausea and regurgitating like a goat. I tried all the remedies I knew, baking soda, vinegar, Pepto-Bismol, nothing worked. Finally, when I started feeling a pain in my left arm, I asked the guys to let the folks downstairs know I needed an EMT. They took me to the hospital where the emergency room doctor said, "Good thing you came in, you're having a heart attack." They paid great attention to me at Bellevue. They went over and above to make me comfortable. Even the non-medical staff helped me feel at home. I met a cleaner there from Jamaica, and we exchanged our memories of home. And when she mentioned that she sometimes brought Jamaican food to the hospital to sell to her co-workers, she paused and said, I think I'm going to bring you some food. And I like to think that when she brought me a traditional Jamaican dinner of rice, kidney beans, and chicken, that was part of the healing process. One day, my physician asked me how things were coming along with my application to move into a subsidized apartment. My answer was, I need to get out of that shelter right away. It's urgent. Living in the shelter was affecting my health. Who knows if I would have had a heart attack under different circumstances. But it was also hard at the shelter to keep a grip on my sense of who I was. Because of that doctor, the very next day, I got a call from a social worker who got me into a program that arranges housing for people who are in the healthcare system. I should say this was the second time George was in the hospital because of heart problems. Once I moved out of the shelter, I stayed in my apartment for days, soaking everything up, being in my own space, not being afraid, not hearing the fire alarms and shouts of, "Get up, get up, get up." And I no longer had to get out of the place where I lived every morning and then rush to get back in before the doors closed. I was finally out of prison. That's what it was like, prison. All my life, I'd worked hard to have a good character, build strong bonds with people, contribute to my community, keep learning, use my voice to make a difference. But now I was in the system and I had been sorted. And who I was, what I had accomplished, and what I needed as an individual didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the code on my intake card, even if it was wrong. They had incorrectly labeled him as a pedophile. How can the individual survive being part of the system? I'm grateful to all the people at the hospital whose attention made me feel seen and heard. And I'm grateful to the primary care physician and caseworker who saw me as a human being. They helped heal more than just my body. If you encounter someone who is ill, disabled, or homeless, I hope you will remember the humanity that resides in all of us. Remember, each person has a story. Empathy will allow you to connect with anyone. And by celebrating their humanity, you will also celebrate your own.
Hi, my name is Laura, and this is from my story called The Best Day, and it's for my mother. My mom's stroke came out of nowhere. She survived, but she was in a coma, and I was constantly next to my mom's bed in the hospital. I would wake up contorted in a chair with another chair in front of it. I would wait for the nurses and doctors to come by and run tests or draw blood so I could try to get a handle on what to expect. A social worker would come by and ask what our plan was. I didn't know what our plan was. It was the end of the month. Should I even bother to pay her rent? Would she ever go back to her third-floor apartment? I couldn't ask any questions. I didn't know what questions to ask that could even be answered. Occasionally, a doctor would say something like, "We're in this for a marathon, not a sprint. You need to save your energy." For what? I wondered, for a funeral, to have my mom live with us, to simply not fall over and die myself? I was being too polite an advocate. I was not advocating. I was too intimidated by doctors to ask them to pause over some detail with me. Not once were we offered outside resources for families of people with traumatic brain injuries. Not once was it suggested that we find a support group. Not one mention was ever made of the myriad nonprofits and social service agencies that could have maybe helped us. I felt hopelessly adrift in a world that would simply chew my mom up and spit us both out. The bills were already piling up, and her landlord was already stressing me about when he could expect payment because even if there's nobody living up there, I still have to make my mortgage. I paid her rent, which I could not afford on top of my life, and I cried. My heart couldn't accept what I was starting to logically realize. Our lives were about to be completely turned upside down, and there was no safety net. It was my fault no one answered my questions. I was too afraid to ask them. I was too panicked to have words. I was too overwhelmed to have ideas. So instead, I was curled up in a ball in a chair, taking up as little space as possible. The next time you see a person not asking questions, ask yourself a question. How can I help? What do they need to know? Thank you.
All right. This,
And she's not AJ.
this story belongs to AJ, and it is read with honor by Teresa. When I was growing up, my family members, parents, siblings, everybody had depression, anxiety, and PTSD, all the run-of-the-mill mental health stuff. My father suffered from depression and PTSD because of his experiences growing up with an angry military dad. My mother spent days locked up in her room. That was depression too. A lot of people in my family have addiction issues. One of my earliest memories was pleading with my older brother during an intervention because he was addicted to heroin. He looked terrible, like he was dying. I remember pleading with him to stop because I needed him to be my big brother. I recently got a call from my other brother saying he had overdosed on some weed mixed with fentanyl. They had to revive him 3 times to get his heart restarted. Growing up, it was always rough witnessing the fighting, the rage in my family. I was 8 years old when the state took me away from my mom because they thought she was abusing me. They were wrong, but when they asked me where I wanted to be, I chose my dad. But after I moved in with him, he just stood and watched when my stepmother hit me and threw me around. She called me fat and told me I wasn't worth anything. She shouted that my mom and I were both stupid bitches. My sister ended up in pretty much every mental hospital in Massachusetts because her biological dad sexually abused her. She told me that hospitals are a way out, a place to escape and be safe, where people won't hurt you. Later, she changed her mind. She told me, be careful with that because I got hurt in the hospital. It seems like nowhere is safe. Maybe it's because of my own mental health struggles that I notice others who are struggling. A while back, I had a friend who was having a hard time trying to fight addiction and substance abuse. One night, he randomly asked me to go with him to Hampton Beach at 10 at night. We just drove out there and hung out. We were talking on the beach, and when he decided to run out towards the waves, I knew I had to tackle him because I had an idea on what he was doing. I told him that his life was worth it and that he mattered. Just saying that seemed to change him for the better. And he is doing better now, I think. Like my friend, I've come a long way in the past few years. I know I look good now, right? But looks aren't everything. I didn't look like this in the beginning and used to be referred to as a girl quite frequently, even when I asked to be referred to by my proper name and pronouns. I've lost many friends and family members, and I have even been treated with disgust, hate for just being who I am. And still face anxiety and depression every day with social interactions because I never know how someone is going to respond to me, and I'm under attack no matter where I go. My guard is always up. The next time you interact with someone, just know that you may not know about their personal battle they could be facing in their own head. Maybe all they need to hear is that you think they matter.
Our reading. Those were small nuggets from much longer, richer stories, but we wanted you to hear a piece of everybody's story. So now I'd like to open the conversation to all of you. But before we do that, I just wanted to give special thanks to Hugh Silk, who's done a wonderful job with this project. And to Dr. Joel Popkin, whose mother was a student in my first storytelling course at the age of 100, 13 years ago, and who has been my strongest supporter ever since then, and who helped make this project happen. He saw a draft of the first version, and he said, we've got to do this. So I wanted to thank both of them. So